Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. In our first story, the OP found a way to outplay the wicked old woman and make money at the same time. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Lead supervisor gets mad that coworker and I used our paid break to eat. I work in a lab that employs a lot of people nationwide. Kind of irrelevant, but whatever. We get a lot of cases from doctors and hospitals all across the country every day to run tests they order. Because of the sheer amount of cases we get daily, we have a lot of QC that needs to be done by the end of the week, and if it doesn't get done by Saturday night, we have to do a rotation every week to finish it. My actual supervisor said we have to stay 4 to 6 hours or until everything is done. There's this cynical old woman who works in my department. She's a massive pain in our butt and sends endless amounts of emails a day about fixing things that aren't broken, doing something wrong even though we follow her directions, all while she's doing none of her own work. She also happens to be the lead of our department even though she never sees any of us because she's in the back office, not in the actual lab. She works third shift. Today's my rotation. It just so happens to be my birthday weekend. My birthday was Friday, and my coworker, who I'm doing the rotation with, brought breakfast burritos for the two of us. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of work last week, and there was minimal QC to do. After we stayed for an hour and were 80% done with our work, we took a paid 15-minute break. 16 minutes later, we come back into the lab, and she starts yelling at us because we went over our time, and she leaves the lab and calls our manager, who basically said it doesn't matter since we're still getting the work done. Old woman comes back, and I say that we can't leave until the work is done, even though she'll be leaving in about an hour. Okay then. We finish all of our work about 10 minutes after we come back from break, but since we're still on the clock, we decided to stay for the entire 6 hours doing mindless work, cleaning already sanitized stations, deleting emails, dusting keyboards, changing pens, etc., which will cost the company about $300 more because of overtime pay on our paychecks. All because we were 1 minute over. And our second story. Karen tries to get manager arrested because she's a vegan. So a bit of background. I'm a new law enforcement officer at my agency, and it's my first month out on my own. It was near the end of my 12-hour shift, and it was a busy day, lots of reports and calls, so my dispatch sends out a call to local fast food Mexican place about a woman who was calling to have a cop show up. It wasn't in my area, but I was the closest unit, so I picked it up. Boy, did I regret it. I arrive on scene and meet everyone involved. EM, entitled mom, IK, innocent kid who looks in her mid-teens, and M, manager. EM and EK are waiting in the dining area with manager by the counter. Me. Hello, ma'am. I'm OP and you called to speak to law enforcement? EM cuts me off. About time you show up. I demand that you arrest the manager of this place. Me, very confused. Okay, what did he do to you? EM, he tried to poison my daughter and he won't give me a refund. How did he try to poison your daughter? We are vegans and this man put meat in her food. When I demanded a refund, he refused. I want him arrested now. So I go to the manager and start to speak to him about what happened. So what happened today? Manager. EM comes in and orders a meal. And told me, yes, EM's daughter got the wrong meal. EM goes ballistic and approaches the counter and starts cussing out my employees and throws the food on the wall. When I offered to replace the meal, she called me a insert racial slur and called you guys. I look over the manager's shoulder, and there's food on the wall from where she threw it. Now the problem is, I cannot make the restaurant give her money back. This is a civil issue, so I have no legal authority on the matter. So I go back to my patrol car, I get the corporate number for the restaurant, I then go to talk to EM, who was talking to IK about how mommy was going to take care of everything. Me. Ma'am, here's the number for the corporate office as this is a civil matter. I have no legal authority to force a private business to do anything, and the manager did not commit any crime. EM. What? Did your simply high school education brain not hear me? He tried to poison my daughter. Arrest him. I had to take a step back because at this point she was screaming in my face. IK kid buries her head in her arms as she was bright red. Ma'am, he mistakenly gave you the wrong order. Attempted to fix it and you refused to accept it. Your dietary preference was violated but there was no attempt to poison your daughter. I want to speak to your supervisor. At this point, I put out on the radio for my supervisor, but they're busy with shift change. I look at the manager, who walked up to me with that "I'm tired of this lady" crap look on his face. Manager, I would very much like this lady to leave. Me, I can trespass her if you like. The manager smiles and says yes. My supervisor arrives on scene a little while later, and I explain what was happening and what the manager wanted. So my supervisor walks to EM and speaks to her. He comes back over to me, holding back laughter. He told me the EM said I was unprofessional, cussed at her, and called her a vegan bee, and asked for my information so that she can file a formal complaint against me. I guess EM didn't realize the big black box in the center of my uniform was a body camera, and my supervisor knew me from our time together in the military, so he knew she was full of it. So the manager filled out the paperwork to have her trespassed from the property. My supervisor let me tell her. Ma'am, as I said before, this is a civil matter, but you've been trespassed from this property, and you must leave or you will be subject to arrest. I am a tax-paying citizen of this county. That stupid, insert racial slur, is probably an illegal. You should be arresting him. I'm going to have your badge for this. Now, what happens next is what makes this story crazy. IK, who's been silent the whole time, stands up and speaks. Mom, cut the crap. You eat meat and we all know it. Just stop it. You're making it way worse than what it needs to be. All of us were in complete disbelief at what IK said. EM turns bright red and walks out of the restaurant, IK following her. The restaurant manager thanks us, and I finally get to go home after surviving my first encounter with a Karen. Love how the kid just ratted her out. And our last story. Despite the will, my Aunt Karen thinks my parents' property belongs to her. This happened almost 5 years ago. Karen was my mother's older sister, and she constantly interfered in my mother and her children's lives. She never liked my father and always tried to tell my mother that she made a mistake by marrying him. She didn't like the name my parents picked out for my older brother, and my great-grandmother died the day before I was born, and when Karen found out they were going to name me after her, Karen freaked out and said she wanted to name her potential future kid that so my mother couldn't use it. Then she tried to talk her out of it by saying it's too old-fashioned and kids would make fun of me, which they did, but for other reasons. She criticized both my brothers and my choice of friends, and even complained when I started playing softball because proper ladies didn't play sports, and if her daughter ever tried playing a sport, she would have her removed from the team. Spoiler, she never had children. The day after my 16th birthday, my parents drove on a business trip down to California. I live in Idaho. My dad said that when they got back, he'd drive me to the DMV to get my license. He never did, because on the drive to California, they hit a patch of ice, spun out, crashed, and died. I was a wreck for some time after that. I didn't even want to attend my high school graduation later because my parents wouldn't be there. Their will split everything evenly between my brother and I. At the funeral, my parents, who own their own business, production manager Tim, was talking to my brother, and my brother told him that in a couple of weeks, he'd step in and take over, and he was counting on Tim to run things smoothly until then and help him in taking over and learning the ropes. I had no interest in the business, other than it was a guaranteed summer job when I was growing up, so I stayed out of it and just collected profit checks until I sold my half to Mark, and he continues to run the business to this day. Mark told Tim that he should assure the employees that their jobs were safe and that no major changes would be made. Then one day, Aunt Karen showed up and began putting her stuff in my parents' office, and when Tim confronted her about this, she said his services were no longer needed and he was fired. Tim called Mark up, and Mark went down with the family attorney, some police, and the necessary paperwork and had her removed, while she said the place was now hers because it was her sister's, so she was now the owner. As long as I've known her, she's never had a steady job. She's had 3 husbands, not counting the man who called me, never met him, and milked each one for as much as she could until she divorced him. The next day, I was leaving for school. I walked, it was fairly close, about 10 minutes, and saw her car and a moving van parked outside. She said she was moving into her house and then said it in a sickly sweet voice that for a reasonable rent, she would continue to allow me to stay there until I graduated high school. I went in and called my brother, and he again showed up with the family attorney, police, and all the paperwork and had her removed from the property. I was at school, so I didn't get to see what happened, but that night Mark gave me a business card for a policeman who I assumed helped deal with all this, and told me that if I ever saw Aunt Karen on or near the property to call that number and report her immediately. Don't even try to confront her or give her a warning, just call. I do know that the movers charged her to move her stuff into the van, drive across town, get turned away, and drive back across town and move her stuff back into her apartment, which she hadn't given notice yet. I got scared to the point that I didn't like letting our dog into the backyard when I was at school. I used to put her out in the yard to let her play in the fenced backyard while I was in school. For a while, I just put her in the locked and closed garage, then cleaned up her messes when I got home in the afternoon. Eventually, Karen moved to Colorado, where I assume she met and married the man who called me and said that she had died and he couldn't find anyone from her family to attend the funeral. I chose not to tell him about her, politely said, "Sorry for your loss, but I can't make it." From discussions with Mark, he basically told him the same thing. Outside of myself, Mark, and Mark's infant daughter, I don't think she has any living relatives. I still own the house, but still sleep in my bedroom. I refuse to move into what was once my parents' bedroom, the master bedroom, go to the local university, go Broncos, and still miss my parents and think about them every day. And even though I'm 21 in less than 2 weeks, own a large home, have a lot of money in the bank, I'd trade it all to have my parents back. But I don't care about the how or why of Aunt Karen's death. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.